Today, China is one of the most developed countries in the world. China's gross product is larger than that of the United States or the entire European Union. What can I say? Even this video you watch through a phone or monitor made in China. Let's find out how and why China became great. China has remained a poor agrarian country for a long time. The first attempts to break out on the world level were at the beginning of the last century. After the overthrow of the emperor in 1911, the new republic proclaimed a course of reform. But due to the disunity of the government and bureaucracy, the effect of these reforms was insignificant. In the middle of the century, after the Civil War, the Communist Party led by Mao Tse-tung came to power. The leaders of the People's Republic of China have repeatedly tried to solve the problem of satiety and warmth, which was associated with frequent cases of hunger in the country, as well as lack of access to the basic benefits of civilization, housing, education, and medicine. In addition, most Chinese residents did not have basic things, such as watches, clothes and shoes, not to mention more. A big leap was supposed to change the situation. In agrarian China, they decided to quickly and decisively catch up and overtake developed countries through sharp collectivization and industrialization. It was a real disaster for the country. To understand the scale, we can add that because of this, famine began in the country, and it grew so much that up to 40 million people died from it. In 1976, Mao Zedong dies. This man, Deng Xiaoping, becomes the leader of the country. It is he who will make China great. After Deng Xiaoping came to power, the first thing to do was to solve the problems created by the big leap and bring China to a stable level of GDP growth. A policy of reform and openness was proclaimed. At the first stage of the reforms, high growth was provided by agriculture, freed from the restrictions of the Mao era. Communes and brigades, something like our collective farms, were dissolved, and family contracts were created instead. The party encouraged the large-scale development of small-scale production, handicraft industry. A huge mass of small, technically backward enterprises arose in the country, where artisans, tailors, shoemakers and the like worked. Meanwhile, state-owned enterprises remained mostly unprofitable. To fix this, the role of the government has been reduced. Managers were given more managerial authority. The pressure on foreign trade was eased, and the merger of enterprises with foreign firms was officially encouraged as the primary sources of new technologies and scarce foreign currency. An open-door policy was introduced in foreign policy, according to which the PRC allowed international trade and foreign direct investment. The Chinese diaspora abroad played a big role in this. These initiatives immediately increased the standard of living of the majority of the Chinese population and later made it possible to support more complex reforms. Nevertheless, the movement to the market was systemic and complex, and in 1987 the transition was far from complete. The reduction of restrictions on economic activity has quickly eased some of China's most stagnant economic difficulties, but has also given rise to new challenges. Along with new opportunities for profit-making, there were growing income inequality and new temptations for crime, corruption, as well as the Western value system, considered by many older Chinese as a decline and spiritual desecration. The state still controlled the largest non-agricultural enterprises, and a significant part of the industries were still mainly guided by central planning. Thus, the Chinese economy in the late 80s was a very mixed system. It could not be described not as planned, not as market. On the one hand, the economy was no longer so much controlled by state planning due to the large growing market industry. On the other hand, the market could not work effectively, since many goods were still under state control and most prices were still restrained or limited by the government. At the same time, in the early 90s, the Chinese authorities proclaimed a technology for market policy, which assumed the cession of part of the market to multinational companies in exchange for the transfer of foreign technologies to China. Western corporations hastened to take advantage of the extremely low cost of labor in China and massively transferred their production facilities to China, and then research centers. The main financial donors were firms from the USA, Japan, and Western Europe. Companies not only invested money in expanding Chinese production and opening new factories, but also created their own branches and factories in China. All this has become possible due to the fact that Chinese production has moved from assembly and processing of a minimal nature to complex processing and manufacturing of products. As a result, not semi-finished products came from China, but ready-made goods, objects, and things. Thus, the PRC began to gradually increase the pace of exports of goods and items abroad to the United States, the European Union, Latin America, and Asian countries. In the noughties, the state strategy of going abroad was announced. If before that China was mainly trying to attract investment into the country, now its equally important task has become to enable Chinese companies to spread their influence abroad. Various benefits and easements were introduced to increase exports of products from China. It was this policy that influenced the entry into the international market of many companies that create equipment and cars that do not even need to be introduced. Over the past 30 years, China's role in the global economy has increased significantly. Now China is an important player in the global market, being the main producer of the absolute majority of products. During this time, China has turned from a backward agrarian country, where the majority live below the poverty line, into a factory of the world. This, of course, affected the residents of China themselves. Over the past 30 years, the number of people living below the line has decreased from 700 to 16 million people. And this is in a country where almost 1.5 billion people live. Subscribe to the channel.